I'll never forget that morning. I had already missed the school bus, but I stood there anyway, watching and envying the birds.
First impressions can be unreliable, even for a $2.50 walking sim. I'm a big fan of Gone Home, and to a smaller extent, Dear Esther. So when I found a new walking sim released on Steam, and it advertised itself as a game in a similar vein to both of those games, I had to give it a go. Home is Where One Starts is developed by David Well, and is dirt cheap on Steam. It's also dirt short, but that's advertised. Under key features, it lists a 15 to 30 minute experience that can be completed in one sitting, and the rest of the features are vague enough to sound positive. I'd have preferred if Home is Where One Starts had a price 10 times higher, and for the game to be 10 times more, instead of a game that has so little in it for so little money. On the surface, Home is Where One Starts does come off as something between Gone Home and Dear Esther. However, quickly you notice the lack of atmospheric development and interactivity of Gone Home, while also lacking the immersion and, well, prettiness of Dear Esther. Though for $2.54, maybe that's too much to ask for.
I had walked around the woods a million times by myself, but it felt different that morning. I thought about how ancient those giant trees were, and how they were probably the same size when I was born. It seemed so long ago when I was a baby. That morning was the first time in my life I realized that I was growing up.
The story of Home is Where One Starts is somewhat hard to describe, as after playing it twice, I'm not sure what the story really is. You start out looking up at the dusk-stricken sky with birds flying overhead. You look down and are presented with this picturesque scene of the sun setting over a hill, silhouetted trees, a house over in the distance, a pond, and even some hay bales. It's so pretty. It's like it's from a postcard. It's also about as deep as a postcard. The voiceover speaks about missing the bus and then later reading books, hanging out by the pond, climbing on top of the hay bales, and exploring in general. And I just described about half the voices in the game. There are maybe 10 separate voiceovers within this game, so don't expect to get sucked into a rich backstory. Now, voiceovers are important, but I'm not saying that you need voiceovers to have a good story or plot. And if you've played Gone Home, you know that the voiceovers weren't even what made it interesting or immersive. It was all the items, notes, contextual items, and random things you found which painted the story surrounding the entire family. And just like in those other games, you begin walking around and looking around. You pick up some objects, you turn them around in your invisible hands, and then you put them down and keep walking. And that's pretty much it. This is probably my biggest gameplay gripe with this title. There's just a shocking lack of interactivity or even vocal feedback about the items I'm looking at. I'll pick up an item that I think is interesting, or could be interesting, but without the game doing anything at all, I'm just guessing it's important within the lives of the characters, but I'm given no context. And when I'm picking up books, I'm unable to clearly read pages or the cover without leaning towards my screen, as everything in the game is dim, and there is no zoom function when holding onto an object. And even if the amount of interactivity in the game stayed the same, there is also a severe lack of unique items in the rooms and areas. The room of the main character has a bed, 3 space posters, a Game Boy, a Bible, and a computer in parts. So we know she's nerdy, reads the Bible, plays games, and also sleeps, but the nuances of that are completely missing. And to be clear, I realize that the family is not well off, so I don't expect lots of material wealth in her room. But how about notes, letters, bookmarks in her books, clothes, trash, scribbles on the walls, maybe some loose cartridges for her Game Boy, just to get a little bit of extra context into her tastes and interests? We don't get that. We hear a single audio piece about her interest with space, but it could have been generated by a computer.
I had an obsession with space. I thought I'd be the first astronomer to discover a planet beyond Pluto. I also thought birds could fly anywhere, even to outer space. To be a bird and to fly to other planets, I couldn't imagine a more perfect life.
It lacks any specific details relating to her, the area, her life, her family, no relation to where she is, nothing specific to tie the audio to, the game we're playing. Just like with the rest of the audio in places in the world, it's so detached. If I was told, there's a girl, she likes space, and she has a computer, write up a few sentences about that and we'll use it in the game, I could have come up with what was played in the game. And that whole vague feeling continues with the general items and gameplay part of the game. Things like opening drawers, cupboards, looking in cabinets, exploring, stuff like that kind of thing. It's really not in this game. There is one drawer you can open, which is part of what I guess you call the main quest line. There are many doors which you can open for not really much purpose, but besides that there is a mind-boggling low amount of objects you can pick up, let alone look at in detail. In Home is Where One Starts, you could probably count the items you can interact with on 2 hands. So let's do it. Backpack, bat, fishing rod, book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, soccer ball, toy, spray can, rubber duck, music box, and dog treat box. Alright, 13 items. 2.6 hands worth of items. And I typically wouldn't complain about that if there was more going on. For this being an exploration narrative, there isn't much narrative. If there was more to listen to while I walk aimlessly around in this small plot of land, I might have forgiven the small collection of items. But with perhaps 10, maybe, different voiceovers the entire thing, I spent the vast majority of my time walking around hoping to trigger something else. Just something to read, to figure out, to listen to, something. Home is Where One Starts, visually, is a hodgepodge of assets. Some of the grass is fake 3D, while others are 3D. Some trees are 3D, while others are fake 3D as well, completely wrecking any pinch of immersion I had. Believe it or not, if it was all fake 3D, I probably wouldn't have noticed it as much as I did. And while I do like the atmosphere and the feeling that the game evokes, it's a very inviting game. It's not very good looking. Audio is similar to the visuals. Good first impressions. Walking through the trees, hearing the wind blow is great. I wanted to go there and explore it myself. The music is so somber and sad and yet still calming. It put me in the mood to relax and listen to a story and explore mentally what was going on. And then that same music track loops the whole time. Eventually, after maybe 10 times, the music finally stops and the atmosphere sounds play on their own, which were also fine for a while until some weird sync problems came into play and I thought I was hearing radio interference as part of the story, which was a little bit creepy. In the time you spent watching this video, you could have purchased the game, downloaded it, and probably finished it by now. Home is Where One Starts feels like the textbook example of padding, and still amazingly being shorter than one of my own reviews. Going off the typical price per hour of gameplay, it's still not good. Even if a game is cheap, there is a limit to how small or short you can make a game and still make it feel compelling. Home is Where One Starts feels like it's trying to be the poor man's Gone Home, while still missing the many reasons that that game was so good at what it did. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review and would like to see more reviews, first impressions, or whatever random stuff I come up with, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook where I post updates on projects and more. But for now, that is all from me, and I will talk to you later.